Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Linn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV 9.
Good morning and welcome to Ethical Perspectives on the News. I'm the Reverend Tom Capo, minister of People's Church, Unitarian Universalist, and I'll be your moderator for this morning's show. Debbie Durham, director of the Iowa Economic Development Authority, issued a press release recently about the economic benefits of a large tax credit granted to Orascom, an Egyptian company, to build a fertilizer plant in southeast Iowa. This is a quote from Ms. Durham. The REMI, or Regional Economic Models Incorporated, analysis of the Iowa Fertilization Company project speaks for itself. On the front end, the Iowa Fertilization Company will inject $1.4 million of capital investment into our state and create at least 165 permanent jobs and thousands of construction-related jobs. Now we know the benefits of that project, and it will serve Iowans for years to come. And so we wonder, or at least I wonder, would this project have gone ahead without the incentives? And are other states out there providing the same kind of financial incentives to bring companies like Orascom to their states? Is this project or other projects that are brought to Iowa financially through some incentive worth it to us here in Iowa? What is the price of economic development in today's world? An interesting question, and one that we'll pose to our panel here and see what they think about it. So, to my immediate left here is Rick Eichhorn, is that right?
Yes.
He's a professor of economics at Coe College. Next to him is Dennis Jordan, Vice President of Economic Development at the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance. Thank you for coming. And finally, on the end there is Rick Moyle, the Executive Director of the Hawkeye Labor Council, AFL-CIO. So I want to thank you all for joining in this discussion.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having us this morning.
Well, sure. This is sort of out of my area of expertise, so I'm going to have to ask a few kind of preliminary questions to kind of get us started. So why do municipalities, cities, states, counties use financial incentives or tax incentives to lure business here? Why does they do that? Why is that so important?
I think it's actually, pardon me if I go first, but
sure.
I'm sitting here. I think it's actually very standard that these types of tax incentives are granted. In short, I mean, you quoted this enormous $1.4 billion investment coming in right away, and that's kind of the tip of the iceberg, and then there's a lot of multiplier effects that come in with it. And so, it's I would say it's a competitive marketplace to try to lure firms in this way in order to take advantage of the jobs, the income, the tax revenue, the amenities that eventually, come out of all that extra spending in a local community. And so I think, when you add up at the end of, or maybe when the project comes to maturity, what the actual local benefits are, hopefully they're going to be much more than the tax incentives that were used to bring it here in the first place. So
I think Rick is exactly right, and I've been in economic development for the last 12 years, and I've traveled around North America and Europe and meet with a lot of company executives about locating their business to the Iowa's Creative Corridor or the state of Iowa in general. And without an exception, the question does come up about incentives, and very few are actually looking for handouts. They expect that in return for any sort of incentives that would be offered, they are making a commitment for job creation, capital investment. So we very much view it as a partnership. We as a community or state make an investment in their company, and they in turn make an investment in our community, in our region.
Okay. Rick,
well, we definitely do it. Our, municipalities, et cetera, definitely do it to encourage the expansion or growth of business within the communities. I know that there's many people out there that think or believe that these businesses would come here irregardless of if the subsidies were there. So therefore, I believe that the public officials need to be good stewards of the public money, and I believe that they need to be good bargainers with these businesses to make sure that that this is really something that we need to do.
I'm hearing from you that sometimes you're not so sure about that?
I'm saying that some people, you can hear it throughout the community, and you can read a paper, and many people have the opinion that these businesses possibly would have came here anyway.
Are there reasons to sit down and negotiate with these people rather than just say, we have a great community here. You'd love to come here. We have, Cedar Rapids. We've got the Paramount. I mean, it's a beautiful place to live.
Right.
You raise your kids. Isn't that enough?
I would think they're probably looking for being in an area where there's a distribution network, where there's the proper labor market that they can draw from, where their models, where their profit models tell them this is where, this is an optimal place for us to be. And then they would probably identify quite a few of these locations. And, maybe they reach out to local officials and say, we're considering this, what do you have to offer? Kind of, I would assume that it's not just, this is, Cedar Rapids is a beautiful area to be. Let's move this Egyptian firm here. It's a profit maximization strategy where they're going to factor in a whole bunch of variables like that. And then this, whatever package they're going to get is just one of those variables that they can weigh against their other options.
It's not unusual for a company to have initially 20 to 30 different communities or sites that they're looking at. And then it's a matter of them narrowing down the selection. And part of the process of doing that, of course, is looking at quality of life. What does the community have to offer? But then really back to the hard costs and availability of skilled labor, transportation lanes, utilities. Depending on really what the industry is, there's different factors that are weighted in that process. But part of that is what sort of incentives, both state and local, might be available. And I think it's important to keep in mind that while that's a portion of the conversation, it doesn't dominate and isn't the selling point for this region or this state for that matter, but it's something to be factored and considered in.
How about labor? Does labor fit into this negotiation in any way, or?
The particular plant that you're talking about in Lee County, I cannot speak for the building and trades. I've spoken with a lot of the members of the building and trades. I do not believe that labor has a huge voice with these negotiations. I think that will come in afterwards, possibly.
Okay. Do you feel like labor should be at the table? Is that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Why should
Absolutely.
labor be at the table?
Well, I think that when you get into constructing these fertilizer plants or whatever you may be talking about, a lot of times you're going to be dealing with that area's building and trades unions. And I think that we can all agree that in our area in Cedar Rapids, there's been a great relationship between business and the building and trades and the other industrial unions in the area. We do provide skilled labor. I don't think that that can be argued.
Okay. Well, I was really curious about this Regional Economic Models, Inc. It sounds like this is some kind of a group that's out there that helps communities figure out whether this is a good idea or not to bring a company to town?
It's, from my experience with REMI, you're actually using basically software, statistical econometric software, and you can plug in. If we put, a little bit in this part of the equation, how much kind of pops out here, 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 and here, and here. And so they look at what industry we have locally, how the industry we're bringing in is related to the other local industries, and they've already estimated pretty much all the parameters of the model, and it's kind of a package that you you plug your variables in, you plug your data in, and it kind of spits out what the impact multipliers are going to be, basically. So
I'm lost. So
Let me maybe put it to you this way. What the state often looks at is for every dollar they invest in a project, they hope to get that dollar back within a 5-year period. Okay, and if they can demonstrate that through this REMI model or other models that they have, they consider that a good investment. And that's oftentimes how they adjust the financial assistance package accordingly to make sure that it's an appropriate amount, it's not too much, and that taxpayers are assured to get the return on investment.
okay, and it's a piece of software?
Well, so all of these different things are interrelated, right? So if this plant comes in, we know they're going to first build everything, and they're going to hire labor, they're going to hire construction, they're going to hire materials. A lot of it might come in from outside the area. They might export it in or import it in, but a lot of it might come locally. And so we can understand if you put, $1.4 billion here, where else is it, where are they buying stuff from? So if I spend $104 billion here, who's getting the income here, here, and here? When they get the income, what are they going to do with it, right? And then how's it going to ripple through? And so you can think about what's the net increase in income, what are the tax revenue increases, because people that come in, if they are bringing in, labor from outside, eventually, if we, hire all the local labor that we need, and then other people move to the area because of this plant being here, they're going to come in, build a house, pay taxes, buy stuff from all the same stores that we buy stuff from. Those people have more income. So it's got these multiplier effects down the line. And so a model like this can help you anticipate, based on the industry that you have currently and the relation, the way that the industry you're bringing in is related to what you already have, how the ripples are going to kind of ripple out.
So does the municipality and the company look at this REMI?
Oh, I'm sure they hire some consultants that do this work for them. Yeah,
Okay.
I've worked on projects similar to this, and it's kind of literally plugging numbers in based on the types of industries that you have, and you can shock whatever you want. You can, let's turn this way up and turn this way down and see how it all bounces out. So,
Oftentimes it is the state or the municipality that's implementing the model. The company's not requesting it. They're going to argue, regardless, that it's a good investment for the community. It's really the burden of the taxing agency, whether that's the state or the city, to determine what's the return on investment. And this model simply helps assess that. And then back to your point earlier about negotiation, there is a time when there's negotiation taking place in terms of how much can be offered in terms of financial assistance based on, again, capital investment, job creation, wages with those jobs, and associated benefits.
And so, let's say Cedar Rapids, for instance. We'll take let's say Cedar Rapids wanted to bring a company to town. What would they present as the benefits for a company coming here? What are the economic benefits coming to Cedar Rapids before they even come to the table with an incentive? What would they say?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. So today, actually, I hosted a client that's an industrial biotech company, and they're coming here because they identified there's some raw materials that are available within this region that are very unique. And so we visited a number of area companies that they could source these materials from. But in addition to that, they're interested in identifying a site to build a facility. They're interested in transportation lanes, both rail and truck. They're interested in understanding what the utility rates are for gas, electricity, water, and sewer. They're interested in understanding availability of labor and the costs of labor. So it's our job to provide them that information, and so they can then compare that with other regions, both whether it's within the state or other parts of the country or around the world for that matter. And in this particular case, we know from past experience that Iowa and Cedar Rapids in particular shows very favorably for this particular industry. And then once we get to identify what the gap is, okay, I think that's very important. What is, say it's a $20 million project, all right, but they've got financing up to $18 million. They need to identify another $2 million to be able to make the project happen. That's when we go to the state and to the city and say, how can we fill the gap of that $2 million? And oftentimes it's an 80-20. 80% may come from the state, 20% may come from the city. And we use a variety of different tools available, whether that's cash, low interest loans, tax credits, job training, or tax abatement at the local level in order to fill that gap.
And as we think about this, again, I come back to labor, and I think how there are other people who are negotiating for the labor for any kind of project that comes to town. You're not, the Hawkeye Council is not at the table when they're negotiating. So how do we negotiate for labor here? I mean, do we say we have a labor force, but we have some union and some non-union? I mean, how is that all negotiated into the process? Do you want to?
That's a good question. That's something that I would like to know.
Yeah, I could probably take a stab at that if you want me to.
Sure.
So, with each county in the state of Iowa, there are wage thresholds that have to be met in order to qualify for state financial assistance. And then that carries over into local financial assistance. So say in Linn County, in order to qualify for financial assistance, the jobs have to be paying at or above about $20 an hour. And there's some flexibility depending on location, what have you. So what our objective is to be able to get as many jobs to qualify at that wage or more. If they don't qualify, then they're not available. Those jobs then don't qualify to get financial assistance, which is often dictated by so many dollars a job. So the company has a decision to make. How many can they get to meet that threshold? And then it's our job to then figure out with the state and the city how many dollars per job approximately would be available to the company. But we're always trying to drive for additional job growth, also in terms of number of jobs, but also higher wages. Our objective is to increase the wealth in the region and the state, and we can't do that by providing incentives to lower paying jobs. We're providing them to higher paying jobs than what currently exists here in the region.
Well, that's certainly good to hear. I guess there are times when I just hear this on the media, that sometimes there are companies that are being brought to town or projects that are being bid out that don't bring in, that don't use union workers or pay lower wages or those kinds of things. But you're saying that as far as the creative corridor is concerned, they try to negotiate a living wage or a higher than living wage.
Yeah, our goal is that for over half the jobs that we attract here on an annual basis, and our goal is over $1,200 a year, that over half pay at or above the average county wage, which is about $20, $21 an hour.
That's good. That's good. Okay, so, all right. So we take some money from the tax rolls in order to incentivize the company to come to town. Or a state or whatever. So then that has to come out of somebody's budget. I mean, at the beginning of the year, states, municipalities, counties, we all have budgets, right? And there's certain money set aside for certain things. So where does that money come out of? And does it affect things like health care, police pay, water and sewer? Where does the money come from for these incentives?
Well, local and state government, they obviously have to have a balanced budget. So if you're giving a subsidy or you're giving out those tax dollars, I think it would be safe to say that there would always be the potential of to meet that budget, to balance that budget, to possibly cut programs or raise taxes on others. I think that would be fair to say. Not always, but I'm saying I think that would be fair to say.
The most common tool at a city level is tax increment financing, where a portion of the property tax is given back to the company over a period of time. So I think we want to be clear here that it's a diversion of the tax back to the entity, and it's an additional tax. So it's not taking out of a budget somewhere necessarily. It's taking the incremental growth and providing that as the incentive. Now at the state level, there is an apportionment coming from the legislature each year in terms of how many dollars are available for financial incentives, whether that's cash, low interest loans, or tax credits. And that's, again, factored in to make sure that we have a balanced budget. But take the situation with tax credits. Companies only receive tax credits if they pay taxes. So, I'd like to think of it in terms of it's a net gain in the end, but you may be sacrificing some money up front in order for a long-term benefit.
But you're kind of saying more sacrificing revenue that would have been rather than taking from another spot. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, revenue that would have been
Right.
as a result of the investment that's made.
Right.
But it does mean that, roads will may have to be built, sewer lines will have to be run, electricity will have to be sent out there, phones, all those kind of things. So there is some cost that could be not necessarily included in a budget for a project that begins without any taxes coming back into the municipality.
Yeah. Sometimes there is some upfront investment that's then factored in as part of the TIF that is then diverted to pay for those infrastructure improvements such as road, utility extensions, and so forth. That's all evaluated in the process of looking at what's the appropriate amount to not only give to the company as an incentive, but also pay for the infrastructure if it's required to accommodate the site.
I've wondered what TIF meant, so you should probably tell us, because there are probably some people out there that don't know what a TIF is.
Yeah, tax increment financing. So essentially, it's a designated area within a city where the city council can elect to utilize a portion of the tax paid and property taxes and decide whether to use that for public infrastructure improvements, as what we talked about with roads and what have you, or it can be used or it can be used as an incentive as cash back to the company over a period of time as the incentive for creating the jobs and capital investment.
And where does that come from? Where does the...
It comes from the company paying the taxes.
Okay.
So an assessment is made early on to determine what the tax bill is. The company then actually, in this case, pays the taxes, and then say they in the contract they're given a 50% refund. 50% of that money then is then given back to them on an annual basis for a definite period of time.
I'm watching the news about down in Coralville, and apparently they've used TIF money quite substantially. Is that correct?
Yes.
And trying to remember, there were some negative thoughts about that. I mean, that maybe they were getting too much or using too much, and that they're growing too fast, and there may be some negative consequences from that. Does that ring any bells, or?
You guys want to weigh in on that?
Go ahead.
All right. Well, each city can make a decision on how they want to use TIF. Mm-hmm. Traditionally, in the Cedar Rapids area, it is used for projects or companies that are involved with interstate commerce. Mm-hmm. So those are defined as companies selling goods or services outside the state, bringing new money in. Mm-hmm. But a city can elect to use it for retail, which is in the case of Coralville. And I think where the controversy comes up is in terms of, is that an appropriate use of TIF dollars, right? When you're providing an incentive for a retailer to move from one part of a metro area to another part of the metro area.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything you'd want to add to that, or is that?
No, I think that the questions are interesting in terms of what you're bringing in, the type of industry you're bringing in, and the expected kind of multiplier effects that it's going to have. So, when you, like Dennis said, I mean, moving one retailer from one spot to another, you wouldn't expect much of a net gain, right? But bringing in an entire new firm that's going to bring in this much, new building, new spending locally, it's going to have substantial, I believe, multiplier effects.
Okay, but that's what Coralville did, wasn't it? Was they brought they took a retail from one place and moved it to another. And is that going to be a net zero gain, or is that?
I mean, I wouldn't think you would have much of a change unless there's a substantial increase in sales over here that you didn't have over here, or it was a larger enterprise over here than it was over here, or that something else replaced it over there that for whatever reason couldn't go over here. I mean, there's lots of variables at play. But I think, a large-scale industrial plant like this is going to bring some pretty big spending into the area.
Yeah, I certainly can see the possibilities, shall we say, of a large-scale factory coming to town and bringing new jobs. I don't see the overall benefit of moving some kind of business from one part, part of the city to from one municipality to another. That's right next door. It doesn't seem to be a net gain about that. I mean, don't you live in Iowa City?
No.
No, I thought you lived. Oh, you were down there. 'Cause I was wondering what people down there were saying about this. I mean, because again, there's some tax incentives and such going on about that, but.
Could it have been a remnant of an old contract that they had? I don't know.
I don't know.
I think that's where the controversy comes up, because everyone has an opinion as to whether that's a wise move or not. Certainly, if you were to talk to some leaders in Coralville, there are some sound arguments in terms of why that investment was necessary in order to spark some other additional retail investment in that particular area.
I mean, that's the rationale that they would use.
I would say, without necessarily speaking on their behalf, I think that's how they would look at it. And Iowa City, rightfully so, may say, hey, we're not sure we agree with that. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure there's a right or wrong. I think it's a matter of that this is where there's a healthy debate in terms of what's the appropriate use of TIF.
Okay. And so people out there who are listening to us talk about this are probably still wondering if it is really in our best interest as a city or a county or state to use money that hasn't even, that's going to be, could have been gotten in the future, the tax incentives, are really going to make a difference to our economy. We have a model that gives us the RIMI model that can give us some information, mm-hmm. but isn't it sometimes just a roll of dice? Isn't it just you're making a guess?
Well, I think it's an educated guess, and the other thing to keep in mind is that there are clawback provisions within these contracts. So if the company does not create the jobs as planned, the state or the local municipality can go back and get at least a portion of that money back. So, there is a commitment being made both ways between both the company, the city, and the state.
There's not always clawback provisions in all of these.
Well, at least with the ones I've been involved with, there have been.
The one in Lee County, are you familiar? Is there a clawback provision to any of that?
Yes.
Is there?
Yes.
Okay.
That's required. Within, I don't know if it's law, but it's a matter of policy within the Iowa Economic Development Authority.
On the entire amount or just a portion?
On the entire amount.
On the entire amount?
Yep.
Okay.
So there are some protections involved in this for us if we do this kind of incentive.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I appreciate y'all educating me about all this, and because I certainly didn't know a lot about it, and I think our government, our people out here didn't know as much as well. The more we can learn, the better. And I think that it's important to know that our officials, our government officials, are really looking at all the factors involved in this as they make these decisions and making the best educated decision that they can. Well, thank you all for being here, and I appreciate you're all contributing. And thank you all for being here with Ethical Perspectives in the News. Take care, everyone.